So I guess it's kind of important to say that, over the last few years, obviously we've had some, um, how do you want to say it? Like disappointments in the stuff we grew up with, Star Wars, Star Trek. And it seems like almost any franchise that we grew up with is being destroyed in some way or another. I mean, it could be Ghostbusters, it could be Star Wars, Star Trek, like I said. I'm kind of worried about the new Indiana Jones. I don't really have any good feelings about how that's going to
Yeah.
go. So, you know, I mean, not dare I say the word woke. Everything is going woke, and that's been, you know, one of the biggest things that has just been infecting it all. And which is why I think what's funny about that in its own weird way has led us to making a video like this because Picard season 3 was like a complete surprise, a very, very pleasant surprise compared to everything else.
Especially
Um,
after season 1 and season 2. I mean,
ugh,
they're polar opposites, completely different in my opinion.
yeah. Well, and I think if I'm not mistaken, you, like me, didn't even watch all of season 2 prior to watching season 3, is that right?
I've only seen highlights from YouTube videos I've watched for season
Mm.
2, and I don't think I finished season 1. I might have finished season 1. I think
I
I
did
did,
finish
but
season
it's been a
1.
while. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I did finish season 1. I finished it. I can't remember when, but I watched I've watched season 1 of Discovery, which I like to call Star Trek Diversity. But I watched that and I was out by the end of that one. Then Picard came up and I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." I thought at the time, I really did. I thought at the time that when Picard came out that they maybe were listening to fans because fans were really this is where the division and the Star Trek fans became pretty prominent. It was there in 2009 when the reboot happened, but it not like it was when Discovery came out. The division was pretty high, and there was a lot of reasons for it. Because I mean, Discovery diversity was very, very woke, very, very, uh, ugh, just unlikable characters and stuff. But and they rewrote their Klingons and did all kinds of
it
virtue
dove off the deep
signaling.
end instantly. I mean,
It
Star Trek's
did.
always touched on sensitive subjects, but they've gradually let you get into it. Gradually brought it in or gradually introduced it. Uh, Discovery was feet first. I mean, you had no choice, but that's what it was, and it just, yeah, they just put it all out
Can
there
I
right away.
Can I kinda make a little, correction to that maybe, or a way of looking at that is that Star Trek in the past always handled things allegorically.
Yes.
Um, and, and to those who listening may not know what I mean by that, what I mean is it never anything that was going on in the world, it never directly put that in Star Trek. It took, like, a version of it, an idea. A good example would be in the original Star Trek, with Kirk, the idea of racism, because in the '60s, racism was still pretty, prominent, on people's minds because of, the civil rights movement, and all that had, just taken place, and so that was pretty fresh. But they didn't like make a Martin Luther King episode. They didn't do that. What they did was
Hmm.
they brought on a race of aliens, and it was pretty kind of cheesy back in the day, but they had the white and black faced aliens, and they were both in the same space, and they hated each other because and what's really cool about how they handled that racism thing back in that day was in like Picard didn't or not Picard, I'm sorry, Kirk didn't understand it because to him they looked similar enough that he didn't see the difference in them. The difference was one guy was black on the left side and one guy was black on the right side, and the white on the left and right was opposite each other. And they hated each other because that was their skin color that was different, but it wasn't a direct, you know, like I said, Martin Luther King episode or something like that. Uh, it was very allegorical. It handled the racism in the Star Trek way.
Mhm.
Star Trek in diversity, it's like blatant. It's like taking topics, talking points from today, and inserting them into Star Trek.
Yeah.
And what's sad about it was that, and we're not going to sit here and be negative on all this whole episode. We promise. We're just kind of setting some things up so you kind of understand where we come from.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
uh, where Star Trek Discovery started failing is that by inserting it directly and inserting modern, 20th century or 21st century now, or I'm sorry, yeah, 20th century talking points, it made it so that the characters in Star Trek, they weren't talking like people from, they weren't talking or acting like people from, what is Star Trek Discovery in the 20, it's much later, isn't it? I can't remember. It's not in the 25th
Uh,
century. It's later, I believe.
it starts out earlier, back in um, pre Kirk Enterprise, back at Pike Enterprise is when it starts.
Yeah, and don't they go past that at some point? I stopped
And
watching it,
then,
so
yeah, and then they jump into the future 900 years beyond.
right. The 32nd century or something like that, I believe, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's
way
something
way
like
into the
that.
future, to the point where
Yeah.
it's more of a dystopian federation that doesn't. I mean, the Federation
Yeah.
is more of hopes and dreams than anything else. It's not really an establishment anymore, and that Earth isn't
Right.
part of it anymore. Yeah,
Yeah. So I Star Trek lost its way because it was no longer talking, the characters were no longer talking and acting the way, um, Star Trek always did when you and I were growing up watching it in the hopeful, we've overcome this stuff future. Um, they decided to go dark and try to talk in the way that we would talk today. And
well,
we
and
don't
they
want that.
criminalize the establishment as the Federation. It's showing. It's kind of going off um, the last of the movie, the new movie series, where it's going into like the section 39 or whatever, into the darker,
31.
oh, the section, sorry, section 30. I know it. My brain's scatterbrained, but it's going into the darker, Federation. That the Federation isn't the perfect government. It's not the perfect world that we all wanted it to be. So they start going down that rabbit hole of, yeah, as well. I mean, that was kind of the thing that turned me off too, into it, or with it, was that, I mean, the Star Trek that I remember was a utopian society. A lot of these things were, they don't think about it anymore. They don't think about racism. They don't think about. It's a
Mhm.
very welcoming, open society, and all of a sudden you bring in, that's not how it is. It's just the modern problems. Everything's exactly the same that many years in the future, and we're going to try to show you how to deal with it today by imposing our views on you the way that we think
Yeah,
they should be.
it becomes very preachy. I think what's important about Star Trek is that it in the past, it always it gave you something to think about. It didn't tell you what to think. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? And and so that's another thing that's, part of this new Star Trek, is that now it's preaching to you. This is how you should think. You're a bad person because, society does this. And, the reality is, and this goes beyond Star Trek. This is kind of modern Hollywood in general, is that as fans, when we go to see movies, it's for entertainment. And we don't we don't necessarily want to go see ourselves in movies. We wanna
yeah,
go there to see characters that we want to enjoy watching. Now, there's different contexts for that. Like I said, Indiana Jones, when I was growing up, it was like, "Oh, I wanted to be an adventurer," but I didn't see myself necessarily. I saw a cool character, and with Star Trek, what it always did brilliantly in the past was that it gave us characters to aspire to. It didn't throw ourselves in front of our faces and go, here's what here's what this is. This is you being reflective. But no, we don't want to see that. We want to see cool characters that we can look up to and enjoy. Thanks for checking out this clip of Two Dudes Yakkin. You can catch the full episode right here on YouTube and on our Rumble channel. That's Two Dudes Yakkin. So please like, share, subscribe, and all those things. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.